you can't have win-win scenarios every single time and in every single relationship all the time in life. That's just not how it's going to work. Right. And he doesn't say avoid the rest of those, although he probably would say avoid lose-lose.
Yes.
Don't do that one.
Right.
But the rest of them, there are times to have a win-lose. There are times to have lose-win. Mm-hmm. There are times to have win-win or no deal.
Yeah.
And there's times to have win-win. But obviously our goal is to be win-win as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And that's why, like you said, he's saying think win-win. Right. That's your goal. But sometimes it makes sense to lose-win. And he gives the example here. He gives the example that, maybe it's like you're in a relationship and you're making a decision and it's just a kind of an insignificant decision. There's no you don't have to put your foot down and die on that hill. You know what I mean? And it's just like, yeah, I can give in on this one. It's not that big a deal. And then he says a lower form of win-win, which is compromise, which is huge in relationships as well.
Right.
And so I like how these different paradigms, they have negative consequences. The win-lose, the lose-win, those have negative consequences, as he mentions, either being like for lose-win would be, later resentment, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're not winning. And so you may still be in a relationship with that person or that business or that employee, but you're not happy about the results. So you start to form some kind of resentment towards that person.
Right.
Win-lose, where you think you're winning, but long-term that person who's losing is going to have the same feeling towards you. They're going to resent you. And, so there are negatives to some of these, but they can also work in a positive way if you default to them appropriately.
Yes. There was a story that I thought of as you were rehearsing that before we move into the next section of the book or this chapter, which was there was a story he told which was really a lose-win situation. Mm-hmm. And so there was a company, a computer company, or not a computer company, but some kind of digital company that worked with some of the computer operations at a bank.
Yes, like a technology company making software for a bank.
Yes, software. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, software. So they created software for this bank, and this president who was at the bank was really excited about it. Everyone else at the company was not really on board with it, not really too happy about it, but the president was really pushing it. And so he signed a contract with this software company. He signed a contract, and it was for a certain amount of years, for a certain amount of money. I think it was like $75,000 or something like that.
Right.
And he left a month to a couple months after that. Mm-hmm. And then a new president came in. Well, I'm sure the people who were not too thrilled about the new software spoke to the new president and said, we're not too thrilled about this software, but they signed, the bank signed a contract. Is there anything that can be done?
Right. They let him know. Yeah.
Yeah. And the president goes to that software company and speaks with them. And, the software company really could have shown some courage and said, well, I mean, you signed a contract, so you're going to have to pay this amount. Right. But instead of doing that, they took this approach to where they said, okay, well, you can have your deposit back. Don't worry about honoring the contract. You can have your deposit back. But if you ever need an update in software, come to us. Right. And so really that's them losing and the bank winning on that situation. Mm-hmm. But then later on in the bank's president's in his tenure, mm-hmm. he goes to that software company, and instead of signing a $75,000 contract, they sign a $250,000 contract.
Right.
So don't think just because not every situation is win-win, don't think mm-hmm. that you're failing in life or that you're not effective just because not every situation works out win-win.
Right.
This chapter, it's a little bit messier than that, and I think he does a good job of explaining that.
Right. Yeah, and exactly. And I think the way that to be able to work in those relationships and have some lose-win scenarios, especially, and not have resentment issues or anything that crops up from those negative effects of a lose-win relationship, is you come from a place of thinking win-win first, and you have all of that in line to then where you can choose to do that in certain circumstances when you're in control and you know what you're doing.
Right.
And it's kind of just being mentally aware of those things. Right. Really is what it comes down to.
Right.
And then of course that leads to the question of how do you even get to a win-win relationship and a win-win situation in the first place? Yes. And that's what the rest of this chapter is about.
Yes.